The little bullet points.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Plugged In from YAA Electric. My name is Justin Fisher. Justice is joining me again. Good morning, Justice. It's bright and early over there
Good
on the
morning.
West Coast. It is the Justin and Justice show. Yeah, today we've got some huge news. Big news. It was a surprise to everyone from the politicians to the EV nerds like myself. We have major EV tax credit updates to share. There's been an agreement, and it is not set in stone that this will be enacted. We're still waiting to hear from a few critical senators as to whether or not this could be passed, but it looks like it has a solid shot at becoming enacted by the end of this year. Let's talk about the details here in a moment. But first, Justice, what's new in your world? What's new in California? Just tell me, how are you doing? How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. What's new is that we had a brownout yesterday, so I was kicked out of my
Mm.
house for an hour and a half. So I got to go
Oh.
sit at the mall and do my work. But you know, I was not looking forward to those days. I thought maybe we were going to be able to skip those.
Well, maybe you can get yourself a big home battery.
Well, that's hard in a multi-unit complex, but I,
Oh,
I sure would like
that's
one.
true. Yeah, you could rig one up yourself. Just kidding. Don't play with electricity. Yeah, that's never good. Well, um, I I've I haven't traveled much these past few days because we've had 11 inches of rain this month, and 7 of those inches were in this past week. So it's been nice and rainy here in West Virginia. But I'm luckily I've got that all-wheel drive on my Ionic 5, and it does help. But yeah, let's get right into the big news because hopefully we have plenty of people tuning in today to learn the details about the latest EV tax credit update. It's not going to be 12,500 like was originally proposed like last year. That's dead. But we do have a very realistic update. Basically, this has a high chance of becoming law and affecting EV sales, EV affordability. But it's not all good news depending on what electric vehicle models you're interested in, because it looks like, based on the latest details straight from the text, that some of these EVs are actually going to lose the credit in 2023. Yeah, we'll talk about that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, start out with a high level summary for all of the viewers and listeners out there as to what exactly this latest proposal agreed to by senators would have for electric vehicle buyers. Share screen. All right, here it comes. Biggest news, the headline. Tesla, who currently has 66% EV market share in the United States, would get the tax credit back. It removes the 200,000 sale cap that was in the original 2008 EV tax credit bill. That means General Motors would also get it back. But of course, Tesla, that's the big news, because that was one of the main reasons I went towards the Ionic 5 from Hyundai to begin with, was the federal tax credit. But it looks like it's going back to Tesla. Toyota, they just reached the 200,000 sale cap. Ford is nearing it quickly. This will no longer be an anxiety for those who are on the fence as to whether or not to buy a Tesla Mustang Mach-E, Ford F-150 Lightning, Toyota BZ4X, etc. If they remove this cap. It's going to remain at 7,500, but it will be income limited to individual filers with a gross income of $150,000 or less, and joint filers with a gross adjusted income of $300,000 or less. Depending on where you live, that's basically the upper limit for middle class, I guess. But I know in some places like California and New York, even that is not enough to get by comfortably, depending on cost of living. Let's get on to some other headlines from this tax proposal for EV tax credit. The tax credit would be implemented at the point of sale instead of on taxes. That's interesting, right?
That's a good. That's great.
Yeah,
That's what we want to see.
that makes it more affordable for more and more people, because what good is a tax credit 8 months down the road when you file your taxes if you're looking at a $60,000 car? Well, making it a $52,000 car sure would help. So yeah, that at the point of sale would be a big deal.
I
This
mean,
is
I
where
think we can see where that goes with the dealership, of course.
Yes.
That
Yes.
they'll mark it up $3,500, put in that tax savings in there, and advertise it as $3,000 less than MSRP.
Yep, and we're going to talk about that today, Justice, after we go over the details, because that could be where Tesla retains an advantage, even an even greater advantage is any automaker with a direct to consumer sales model could continue to benefit because we got to see the wild card is how the dealers are going to responsibly handle this tax credit. We'll see.
Yeah,
All right, so some news that may actually take away the credit from a few very popular EVs is that in order to get the full credit, the EV needs to be assembled in North America. The majority of battery components need to come from North America, and it must contain a certain percentage of battery raw material minerals from countries with free trade agreements with the US. Yeah, we're going to get into the details about this here briefly because there's a lot more to talk about. Um, oh, yep, used EVs. This is huge. Used EVs would now be eligible for a $4,000 federal tax credit. That is big. There is a limit on the cost of the vehicle to qualify. So vans, SUVs, and trucks. I'm assuming that would include like the Tesla Model Y, which is technically a crossover SUV. They would be capped at $80,000 in order to qualify for this federal tax incentive that is revised. And electric sedans like the Model 3 and the upcoming Ioniq 6 from Hyundai would need to be priced below $55,000 to qualify. Now, Justice, let me get your reaction. What is your reaction on these updates? And then we'll get even further into the details.
I mean, overall, I like the proposals. I like the investing in it. I think the price points are a little 2019. I mean, on the Tesla, maybe I guess if they count the Model Y as a crossover. Otherwise, you're looking at with the Model 3 front wheel drive only. That's the only Tesla you could get with that EV credit. So but maybe this will push manufacturers to bring their prices down to 54,999,
Yeah,
and
I'm
which
pretty sure
seems more competition there.
the Model Y would qualify. It's considered a crossover SUV, correct? Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Oh
So
yeah.
I mean, I think there's great potential here, without a doubt. And I like the point of sale. It's a much better consumer friendly model of doing this.
Now, have you seen this? Because I haven't seen it, but it sounds plausible. One of our viewers shared that it would be capped at $25,000 on used EVs. We need to dig that up and see if that's true because that would greatly limit the usability of the EV tax credit for used vehicles. Need to look
But
into that. But
my question that I haven't found an answer yet to on it is, are the same restrictions on the used EV? Does it have to be made in North America? Do the battery components have to be mainly sourced from here, or trade friendly countries?
yeah, I would bet it doesn't, but yeah, I don't know because there are some details about the origin of the vehicle and the origin of the different vehicle components that I do want to get into now. I know I'm talking a lot this morning, guys, but there's a lot to talk about. So now we're gonna hop over to a great resource shared from Electric, which is one of my favorite EV media sources. They have dug deep into the text and listed out all the details about this proposed tax credit and we're here to make sure that this information is as transparent and clear as possible. So we're going to get into the details. I'm going to read this out loud. So bear with me, everyone, but it'll be worth it because we're going to find out that, this has such a high chance of actually succeeding and being passed into law that it's definitely worth talking about the details. All right, here we are. For the new vehicle credit, I'm only going to talk about the details that we did not cover on our own YAA EV tax credit resource. I will update that page with this info, but I'm going to find the stuff that we have not talked about yet. Now, here's some interesting date provisions. The credit applies for vehicles purchased beginning January 1st, 2023. Okay. There's a transition provision for EVs that were ordered in 2022 but delivered in 2023. It allows the purchaser to claim the old credit in 2023. So that means if I ordered a Hyundai Ioniq 5 today, it's built in Korea. Right now, the Hyundai Ioniq 5 does not really have any American parts. They do have plans. They're actually uh, going to build a Hyundai factory in Georgia where they will build these EVs starting in 2024. But for now, that doesn't count. So if I were to order an Ioniq 5 right now and it was going to be delivered in 2023, I would still get the 7,500 federal tax credit because of the transition provision. So that's good news for those of you interested in several EVs. Now let's talk about this. Beginning in 2023, the vehicle must be assembled in North America to qualify. All right, because it is broken into two pieces. $3,750 of the new credit is based on the vehicle having at least 40% of its battery critical minerals, lithium and cobalt and whatnot, depending on the battery chemistry. It must come from the United States or countries with a free trade agreement with the United States. The other half, $3,750 of the new credit, is based on at least 50% of the battery components of the vehicle coming from the United States or countries with a free trade agreement with us. So there are some stipulations here. The 40% minerals requirement increases to 50% and then goes higher on into the future to try to drive up domestic mineral procurement and extraction so that we can basically have the ability to avoid the crazy supply chain issues that the automotive industry is currently dealing with on the semiconductor front. Now, before we go any further, Justice, what's your take on these mineral stipulations and the ifs and buts within the text of this bill? Do you think it's all justified?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's a good focus on the future to bring stuff back to the United States to make sure we don't have these supply chain issues. I love all that.
Yeah, me too.
The problems I see, of course, is now you're going to have to know how much of your battery is produced in the United States before deciding on the vehicle you're going to do. Like that's a lot of consumer education there,
Yep.
unless the manufacturers start coming out and saying, "Hey, this one qualifies, this one does." Like there seems like a lot of research you're going to have to do now.
Yeah, sounds like some new resources that we'll be making over at YAA in the future. Where does your battery raw
Yeah.
materials come from? For sure. Uh, the government has until the end of the year to develop the guidance on this, the specifics. So there's more that we will learn. Beginning in 2025, any vehicle with battery minerals or components from a foreign entity of concern, so like where there might be child labor or unregulated environmental practices, etc., that would be excluded from the tax credit. I'm a fan of this. One credit per vehicle, duh. And we've already talked about the income limits, but if you are just joining us, here they are. We talked about these new MSRP limits, which I'm quite confident that America's most popular EV, the Model Y, is considered an SUV under the federal regulations. So I'm pretty confident it would qualify because SUVs, vans, and trucks are capped at $80,000, $55,000 for sedans. The dealer can apply the credit at the time of sale. This is huge news. This would bring EVs into the realm of affordability for many more households in the United States. And we actually have a termination date, which honestly I'm a fan of because EVs better become more affordable and cost effective and better for the bottom line of automakers by 2032. Yeah, that better happen. So the credit would terminate in 2032. We should not need it by then. Justice.
It's crazy. When was the last time you saw a Senate bill with an expiration date?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yep.
that's insane.
Yep. We'll go over the used vehicle tax credit real quick, and then we'll field some questions from the chat. So if your head's spinning and you're wondering anything about the many nuances of this proposed bill, drop them in the chat. Let us know what you're thinking. The used vehicle tax credit. This would be new. Used electric vehicle credit. Tax credit of 30% of the value of used EV with a $4,000 cap. So in most cases, that would be the full $4,000. Used vehicle must be at least 2 model years old at the time of sale, so you can't flip it, basically.
Yep.
You can't buy it just to sell it.
The dealer
You
can't do that,
Yeah,
and
the
that's
dealer.
what we see that a lot.
Yes, yes, indeed. Um, so you can't sell it to yourself. That's funny.
Yep.
Yeah, of course. The used vehicle must be purchased from a dealer. Interesting.
So
Like to
no
talk.
private party. Nah.
I'd have
Yeah.
to dig into page 390, line 3, but it says, according to
Yeah.
Electric, and they're trustworthy. Used vehicle must be purchased from a dealer. I'll have to dig into that. That's a little interesting.
Interesting.
Um,
Wait. So does that mean not Tesla?
yeah. Oh, that's weird. Okay. Yeah. Oh man, we're gonna have to do some
Yeah.
investigation.
Yeah. I'm gonna dig into that page.
And then here we had that viewer letting us know that it was capped at $25,000. Wow. So I guess as of right now, to use this used vehicle tax credit for EVs, you'd have to buy like a used Nissan Leaf, maybe a used Chevy Bolt, maybe a higher mileage used Kona EV from Hyundai or Kia e-Niro. That's about it. So very
Yep.
limited on this used vehicle tax credit. But in theory, that would improve as more EV models come to market and then more used EVs are on the market in the future. But right now, there's not a lot you can apply this to. Um, this is interesting. Used vehicle qualifies for the tax credit only once in its lifetime. So if it's basically only good for the second owner of the vehicle, the third owner of the EV would not be able to claim this credit. That's interesting. I hope I'm reading that right. I'll have to look into that one. No businesses can use this credit, just individuals. The purchaser may only claim one used EV tax credit per 3 years. Lots
Mm.
and lots of details in this bill. Here's the income cap: 75,000 for individuals, 150,000 for joint filers. Terminates in 2032. Okay, we've gone through it all, folks. I'll have to dig through the bill myself to see if there's anything we missed, but that's a lot of details. Justice, this is still a massive improvement, right? I mean, we'll talk about how some EVs may actually lose the credit, but overall, what's your take? I mean, I think this is good news.
Yeah. I mean, for EV adoption, this is great news, and it makes more sense to me. I've never really fully understood if we're pushing EV adoption, why the 200,000 mark had been there in the first place. Like, why would that be necessary? So I think this is a great jump forward for EV adoption to hopefully make them more affordable. As long as dealers don't take this money from the people, um, I think it'll shift a lot of the industry and focus. Like you said, if the Model Y qualifies, that's even going to shift Tesla production, right?
Yeah,
They're gonna have to really ramp up that Model Y production then, and maybe the Cybertruck will continue at the $69,000 level
yeah, yeah,
if it ever
precisely.
comes.
Yeah, if it ever comes, we hope it does. Yes, indeed. Let's see what some people in the chat are saying. Hmm. So lots of mixed feedback because I mean, there are so many details to become
Yeah.
opinionated on. I can't blame people for kind of having a million questions. Here's a great one. I'd have to dig into the details, but Justice, can you remind us how the EV tax credit is applied if you lease today under the current law?
Well, so some manufacturers will pass that through to you, but it's the OEM that takes the tax credit, not the individual. So, like, you get some of them that will pass that through to you. Most of them will not.
I know one of our auto experts, Space, he taught me never to lease a Hyundai Ioniq 5 or Kia EV6 because those two automakers, they always keep the tax credit for
Yep.
themselves and never pass it on in a lease. So it depends on the automaker. Let's see. Learning Fast in the chat thinks that a used vehicle tax credit will push used EV prices through the roof. I hope not, but it's definitely
Well,
possible.
but if they're capping it at $25,000, that wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah,
I mean, the price, if you go above $25,000, the credit doesn't exist. So what's the point in pushing the used prices higher?
Yep, yep. And we've got some crystal ball thinking going on that we can maybe get into. So, what is this going to do to used values in light of the repo bubble that we have been warning about? Oh, this is yet another factor that you have to sprinkle into the mix to think about the trajectory of used EV prices, because right now we've seen wholesale used vehicle prices going down pretty quickly over the past 5 weeks. I mean, losing
Yeah.
0.5% over just 7 days. 0.5% doesn't sound like a lot. It's not even 1%, but that's over just 7 days. That's the trajectory on the wholesale used car level, but we have not seen prices go down at all with EVs. So, how would this affect
No,
that? It's too soon to know, and I'm not even going to pretend like I can predict that. We'll have to see what the data starts to show. And we got to remember that this has not been passed by the Senate. It has not been signed by the president yet. There is still, I would say, a smallish chance that it would fail. We're still waiting to hear on a few senators if they would support this bill. But, we'll keep you updated. If it happens, this is indeed massive legislation. Got a comment here. Wouldn't the Tesla Model 3 standard range with the lithium iron phosphate battery put a damper on the full credit as is? Not quite sure what you mean in this comment, Justice. You might have an idea.
yeah, yeah. So the Model 3 front wheel drive would be the only one that would qualify under this.
Yeah, rear wheel
Um,
drive. Yeah.
uh, yeah, sorry, rear wheel drive. The long range and performance would be priced out
Yes, because they're
already.
above $55,000. Yes. Yep. Interesting. Is Manchin on board? Yes. So I live in West Virginia. So my own senator, Senator Manchin, he is on board. Him and Senator Schumer were the ones who worked this deal out. We're now waiting to hear from Arizona Senator Kirsten Sinema if she would support it. If she does, or if they can work out a deal to get her support, then it would basically be almost guaranteed to pass. So, yeah, without getting into politics, we're not going to do that. That is the situation as of the moment. Um, yeah, so very, very interesting news here.
Yeah, so just
Wow.
looking it up real fast, by the way, I looked up the Model 3. You could do the the Model 3 rear-wheel drive with upgraded paint and the enhanced autopilot, but you could not do full self-driving because that would put you over the limit.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
even on the rear-wheel drive model, you'd be limited to some of your options to still be able to take the tax credit.
Yeah, but hey, Elon Musk himself said recently that Tesla's current prices are embarrassing. So maybe
Yeah,
if inflation eases and raw material supply chains are no longer so compromised, because right now the raw materials that go into EVs have doubled in cost to about $8,000. If all of those pressures ease, maybe we'd see Tesla reduce prices. They've done that in the past. In 2020,
yeah.
of course, it was the COVID recession, the quickest recession in history, but still, Tesla has lowered prices before. I have faith that they could do it again. Um,
Yeah, they're very reactionary to the actual market. They'll go up and down, just
y-
depending on what the market looks like. And they do it at the drop of a hat. They don't wait for arbitrary little marks. They'll do it on a Tuesday if that's what it looks like they need to do.
And I agree with Igor. Tesla's not going to lower prices anytime soon. I mean,
No, not
personally,
not
I'm
anytime soon.
thinking like 2024 would be
Yep.
a good year
Yeah.
to hope for them lowering prices, especially because of all the money that they've invested in Giga Berlin and Giga Austin. Uh, he- how is he framed? What did he describe them as? They're just like huge money holes or something like that.
Furnaces, money furnaces.
Money
Yeah.
furnaces. That's not good for the climate. Burning money.
No, it's not. Though, Berlin just hit 1,000 a week. Austin is predicted to hit 1,000 a week by the end of next month. So that'll help too.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
want to talk
Raw
about this.
materials are a big deal.
Yeah, this is what was I was going to bring up next. The raw materials and how that is not only the next shortage that we'll be talking about in the next few years, um, it's also a big part of the proposal here in this latest EV tax credit bill. I'm a fan of the way they've worded it in this proposal because I believe we do need to have a strong domestic supply chain for the electrification of the auto industry here in the United States. It makes us more, it builds redundancy so that should any challenges happen, unforeseen challenges, if we're dealing with domestic supply chains, it should be easier to navigate. It's better for the environment, where here in the United States we have more stringent environmental protections for how you extract these types of rare earth minerals that go into batteries, and it creates jobs, which I'm a big fan of. I know that there is a lithium mine, it's beyond proposed. I'm not sure if it's been approved, but in North Carolina, not too far from where I live, there's some talk about that happening in New Mexico, Wyoming. There are a few places where lithium and other rare earth metals that go into EV batteries could be sourced from here in the United States. I think that would be good because it's true. It's true. Nobody can deny that that is one of the greater environmental impacts that EVs do have. But here in the United States, we tend to try pretty hard to find ways to clean up that process, and that could be good in the long run. Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. Will the
I'm trying
Bolt
to.
qualify? What's that?
Did this say the battery components have to be from North America or the United States?
The US or with trade agreements, so like
Okay.
Canada, Mexico, and I'm not even sure how the trade agreements things work. We'll look into that again in a second. Will the Bolt qualify? Yes, it will. It removes the 200,000 sale cap that GM, which includes Chevy, and Tesla and now Toyota have already reached. So the Bolt would qualify. That makes the Chevy Bolt a, like, if there's no dealer markup, $20,000 EV out the
Yeah.
door, because this credit can be applied at the time of sale. That's some of the biggest news with the EV tax credit update, at the time of sale. So let's talk about which EVs could actually lose the tax credit. Until my beloved Ioniq 5 becomes produced at the new Savannah, Georgia Hyundai plant that they are going to build and have online by 2024, there could be a period where the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and the future Ioniq 6 no longer qualify for the federal EV tax credit because of the stipulations that certain components must be made in the United States. Certain percentages of the production must happen here. So there's a period of time where the Ioniq 5, the Kia EV6, um, Volvo, let's see, what else? Polestar, there's got to be others. A Jaguar, um, Porsche. Help me out, Justice. Any others that could lose the credit because they're not built in the US at all? There's a lot more. I
Yeah,
just can't remember.
there's a lot of I don't
Yeah, there's too
know
many
off
to
the top of
remember.
my head. Yeah,
So
there's
this is
more than not.
this is another thing that we will have to create a new resource for on joinyaa.com, and over on the electric forum. We're going to have to find out which EVs are not sourced in the United States at all. They don't have anything built in America, because those would lose the credit until they can bring some of their production to our shores. So that's good for American jobs. But here's an interesting thing to think about right here is Fisker. Stewart in the chat brought up Fisker. Fisker is based in California. However, Magna in Europe is building the Fisker Ocean. That's interesting. So, yeah, got to think
Right?
about
Yeah.
that. Fisker is going to try to get their production onto our shores pretty quickly, I'd imagine. This is true. Thank you for bringing this up. Polestar will be building some EVs in Georgia in the future. That is correct. Thank you for reminding me. So there's a lot in flux, a lot changing right now. And man, yeah, we really need to come up with a written resource to keep track of all this.
Yeah, because like reading through this, wouldn't VinFast qualify because
Yeah.
they're going to be building them here.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to just be an American company. It just has
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be built here.
Yes, it doesn't say anything about where the company's based, nothing like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about where it's built, and that's good for jobs. This is true right here. Green is good in the chat said that the ID4 is now being built in the US as of 2 weeks ago. They started production, and their goal is to have 1,000 ID4s made in the Chattanooga, Tennessee factory, I believe, per month. It's like a pretty high target considering the supply chain constraints everyone is dealing with. Yeah, very, very interesting. A link to the text of the bill, I will dig that up because I'm sure some of us would like to read the details. Electric.com has a great resource that we've been using throughout this chat. So, how long is this? This is a good question we should bring back up. How long is it going to last? It has a phase out in 2032. So, 9.5 years or maybe 10 years, depending on when it would be signed into law. 2032. Now,
which is
Justice
great.
is.
I love to see the end of government programs. I think that is awesome.
Yes, and learning fast, yes, indeed. With the new revision, it is based on where the battery is made and not just where the car is made. I want to go over that one more time since we have a lot more people joining us right now. I'm going to pull it back up. We'll go over those specific provisions. All right. Bear with me, everyone. Lots of shenanigans in here. So the vehicle must be assembled in North America to qualify for the new credit, but that includes Mexico, Canada. Remember, the Mustang Mach-E from Ford is built in Mexico. Number 5, North American assembly requirement applies to vehicles sold after the date of adoption of this bill. So we got to remember this bill has not been signed into law. I would say that might happen within 2 months based on the legislative session that will be coming to an end pretty soon. Might happen quicker than that. The 7,500 credit is broken into 2 pieces, and here's how you qualify for those 2 pieces. 3,750 based on the vehicle having at least 40% of its battery critical minerals like lithium and others from the United States or countries with a free trade agreement with the United States. So I am not a geopolitical expert. I'd have to look in and see which countries have a free trade agreement with us.
We have
The other
20 of them. I
Okay.
actually pulled it up. We have 20 of them. For me, they were very surprising. What
Yeah.
not only what is there, but what is not there is
Interesting.
actually
Okay.
surprising to me. Yeah.
Interesting. Now, the other half is based on 50% of the battery components coming from the United States or countries with a free trade agreement. So the battery components, that's going to be like the battery cells. The battery critical minerals is going to be the raw materials, raw minerals. That's 2 different things that are closely related. Now, it does increase over the remainder of this decade. I support that because, as I mentioned earlier, we've got multiple um, mines basically under proposal, and some of them might be already under operation to begin to mine for lithium and other rare earth minerals that are required in EV production here in the United States. And if you're very conscious of environmental impacts like I am, I have a master's in environmental science. I know what you're thinking. That means more environmental extraction here in the States. Well, you got to keep in mind, we need these minerals from somewhere. They're going to come from somewhere. And in the United States, we have more stringent environmental protections than many other countries in the world. So if it's got to come from somewhere, I'd like to think that we can do it better here in the US. But
Plus,
yeah,
not putting it on a ship and shipping it over here also
yes.
saves an awful lot of environmental causes.
Yeah, and this is another thing to point out right here. So, beginning in 2025, which time flies, that'll be here soon, any vehicle with battery minerals or components from a foreign entity of concern are excluded from the tax credit. So, that's going to be like Congo, where many controversial battery components like cobalt have come from in the past, things like that. Yeah, so many nuances in this information. Lot to talk about today, Justice.
Yeah, it's a really big proposal, and it's a really big shift. I think for a lot of the industry that can happen. I'll be
Yeah,
curious to see where it goes from here.
Yeah. Now, do you think there's anything that's missing from here that you're surprised was not included?
I'm surprised that they kept it at the 7,500. Honestly, that was the um, and then I would like to have seen more charging uh,
Y-
incentives in this.
That's a good
If
point.
you have this something to install a charger or an incentive to help you pay for installation of charging in your home. Something in there.
Yeah, and just because I saw it in the chat, I do want to bring this up. The bill also has some concessions where it does require permitting some fossil fuel extraction from within some of our shores, off the coast of Alaska, etc. So there are some other provisions that I'm pretty sure my own senator, Senator Manchin, got included in there. But hey, gas prices are at record highs, and I'm a fan of trying to keep production domestic to try to keep prices down. But that's a whole nother subject. Hopefully, we can electrify quickly without overloading the grid. I agree
Well,
with
yeah, yeah. There
yeah.
needs to be a change there.
Yes, I agree with what Mark said. Battery recycling will become even more paramount. This is a fact.
Yep.
Now, luckily, we have lots of battery recycling improvements moving from the laboratory. At universities where scientists are trying to work this out, find the most efficient, cost-effective ways to safely recycle EV batteries. Lots of those processes are now moving from the laboratory into business and into industry. So we should have a show all about that sometime. We've got some viewers who think that these restrictions would drive up the price of the raw materials. That's an economics question. I'm not sure. What do you think?
I mean, moving them from places that maybe use labor that we don't agree with to the United States, where labor is much higher. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
absolutely. There's a good chance it would drive the prices higher.
Yep. And I'm going to take some notes right now because I've got some questions for you, Justice, and the whole community that has joined us right now. And if you're listening to this later on the podcast, feel free to send me an email because here's my question. Um, Based on everything we've learned here, what are the questions that you still have about the details of this proposal? Like, we've talked about it a lot. We've talked about it for 40 minutes almost. But what are your questions that remain? For example, I have one. Is this going to be applying to, is this going to be able to apply to Tesla's bought in 2022? I believe that was in the text. The answer to my question was in the text, but I need to get down to the details because basically 3 out of 4 Americans buy a Tesla. Justice, what are some questions that you have about this?
Oh, I'm still digesting. I mean, I know there's going to be a lot more questions right now. Is they're saying that you can take the tax credit at point of sale, but is it still just a tax credit? Do you have to have that liability in the first place? Then, because I know, some lower middle income houses don't have that tax liability. Can they still get the whole 7,500?
So is it refundable basically?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a good point. That wasn't in the summary that we saw, and that's a
Yeah.
big deal. We might
When
try
you
to get
think
that.
it, when you're thinking it's at point of sale, you think it's just an automatic, basically a rebate rather than a tax uh, incentive. But they're still saying it's a tax incentive. So I have questions about that.
That is a good point. Yeah, so anyone else in the chat got some questions? Yeah, we'll have to see. I'm surprised it didn't mention charging infrastructure at all. Maybe that's because they've already dealt with that in the bipartisan infrastructure bill that was passed in late 2021. I know my state just released their plan for how they're going to spend their allocation for EV charging specifically. So Justice, we might have to have a show where we dig into my own state's plan for EV charging because it's interesting. But let's see what Mark
It-
says right here. What about non-trade countries that own a majority ownership in lithium metal mines located in trade-friendly countries? Yeah, corporate ownership. So how is corporate ownership an aspect? Very, very interesting. Um, when it comes to tax credits for home chargers, that's been a separate legislation all along. So that would have to be separate from this as well. But I agree that would be needed because not everyone can spend $1,500 getting their home's uh, circuit prepared for a 240-volt outlet to fast charge their car at home, right?
yeah. Right now, I mean, check your state incentives because there are state incentives for that.
Yes, yes, indeed. So if you have any other questions, feel free to email me at justin@joinyaa.com or justice with an S at joinyaa.com. Uh, Please like, subscribe, smash the like button, pretty please. And we're on Instagram. where we'll be sharing the latest automotive news today because there's a lot of EV news we did not get to today. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a slow week early on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but now we've got a lot of news stories to talk about. So please join us at YAA Electric on Instagram. Or better yet, we're on the community forum, you guys. Join YAA.com. Justice is there all the time. We got the Ray and Zach show talking about more macro automotive perspectives at noon. So that's just 20 minutes in Eastern time. So, yeah, looking forward to seeing everyone there. Justice, it's been a great conversation.
Yeah, it's been fun. I can't wait to dive into all the other news, back on that community.
Yes, yes, indeed. So, looking forward to continuing this conversation. And honestly, I've got a lot of questions about the legislation. I'm going to come up with a revised resource that I will share with everyone. Yeah, we will continue to dissect this info as it gets tossed at us. So, have a great weekend, everyone. Hopefully, we all get some EV tax credits pretty soon. All right. See you guys Monday.
Bye, everyone.